When we lead with love, we carry it 24/7. And when we teach with love, we make sure our students don't forget it. To be black and to educate, to be superhero without the applause. It's to show up and show out no matter the cause. It's to play for the students no matter the winner. Because when we work arm in arm, the impact is bigger. Welcome to Untenured Podcast, where educators have a space to speak their truth. So tap in and listen to the very voices that mold our youth.
So welcome, YouTube community, to another episode of Untenured, where speaking your truth can never go left because it's your right. We are so hyped to have episode 5 here with Mr. Akil Parker at All This Math on Instagram with us to talk about being unafraid of math. And that's a real thing, math phobia. And so he's the CEO of All This Math LLC. He's a math tutor. He's an adjunct math professor at Cheney University. He also teaches independently at online schools. He's a community math resource for the culture. And as he says, real talk, he's improving the relationship between math and the Black community. So with that, I welcome you, Akil, to Untenured.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. Great to be on the platform.
And thank you for responding to a sister's DM, because as we've been going through finding dope educators to connect with, it's really been off the strength of seeing really powerful conversations on personal platforms and just extending a humble invite to, shoot the breeze around being unapologetically Black as an educator around topics of major concern. And so I love your choice of title for this episode, because math phobia is a real thing, especially in the Black community. Can you tell us why you chose the title Unafraid, and really what inspired you to be a math educator, especially as a Black male?
Yeah, so one of the things I do want people to know that they probably would never assume about me, since I'm so like pro math everything, I'm like all math everything. When they see me on social media, when you see me in person in the streets, is that I deal with my own like anxiety, with math at times. So it's really like it's personal work that I do on a regular basis, because somebody might reach out to me for tutoring, and I'm like, okay, cool. We set up the session, and I'm like, just in advance, send me the current content that you're working on. And if it's something that gave me trouble when I was in school like 30 years ago, and I see it, I still get that initial like, whoa, like, what is this? But I'm able to persevere through it, because I can remind myself that no, like I either know how to do this, I've done it, even if I forgot, or I have the confidence to know that I can figure it out because I've done so much math. So I want to bring that to people. I want people to have that feeling. So it's like, I still deal with the anxiety, because I remember sitting in those classrooms in middle school and high school, just sitting there like, yo, I don't know what's going on. Like, what is this? Like, and then I was like, I was so lost. I didn't even know where to begin in terms of asking my questions, or maybe I just I didn't really rock with the teacher like that. So I didn't really even want to ask him or her, like, for help, so I'm like, I'm just like, whatever.
I love that you're bringing that into the space, because one, on the rise of May being Mental Health Month, right? Talking about the trauma that exists with math, and this perception often that people have that math professors, educators are these people that were just born with the gene that just spit out formulas, right? Yaya Whaley Williams, was someone that had severe math trauma and actually didn't get into my mathematical stride until college. And so it's deeply resonating with me when you talk about being triggered about, just things that you learned or didn't learn on your math journey, which is what inspired me to become a teacher. Because I don't know if this is the same for you, but I remember feeling like these math teachers, they just are math people, and I'm not, because they're just up there spitting it out. I'm going to date myself. They had chalk on the board, and they're just spitting out formulas and solving things seamlessly. And that wasn't my journey with math. So I love that you're calling into this conversation front and center. Like, it's something that I still live with and, am battling.
Yeah. And, and in terms of like me becoming a math educator, it's kind of, that's also more like, a story that's not as glamorous, like the motivation for it. It makes me I just thought about this. It makes me think of the late Lerone Bennett Jr., who was a historian and, worked with, Ebony Magazine, an editor and a writer with them. He wrote one of the books that he wrote was this book called Forced into Glory. which is a
Okay.
book about Abraham Lincoln. And it's basically a more factual, actual history on Abraham Lincoln, which contrasts with a lot of what we're told as Black people, like, oh, he's the great emancipator, he's the good white man and everything, and all of that. He breaks it down like look at the Lincoln Douglas debates. Like, Lincoln didn't really love Black folks. He was just as racist as the other white folks, but he just was in the position at the time. He's like, we got to maintain the Union. And, he says things like, if I could have maintained the Union without ending slavery, then I wouldn't have ended slavery. So he was in a position at the time that kind of forced him, to do the things that he ended up doing. Similar to like me becoming an educator. Like, I graduated with a degree in finance from Morgan State. I wanted to go into doing the more like kind of sexy, like investment type stuff, like on Wall Street and Manhattan and all that. But I didn't secure a position doing that. I ended up securing a position at the FDIC in Delaware, doing more like audit accounting type work, which really wasn't my strong suit. I mean, as a finance major, we had to take a few accounting classes, but I got to the FDIC, interviewed well, they extended me the position. And, I ended up moving to Philly so I could work in Delaware, which was close by. And it wasn't a good fit for me. It wasn't really a good fit for me at all. But then, there happened to have been, a girl I used to be in love with. And, and I ended up getting her pregnant. And, that we had a child together. And at the time I had a baby on the way. So I knew I had left the FDIC because, they were going to fire me. But instead I resigned so I wouldn't have the termination, on my record. But I had this baby on the way. So, people, I was looking for like, because I was like, his mom, she was a school teacher also. She was a school teacher already, but I wasn't raised in a way to be like, well, I could just chill. I don't need to have a job because she got a job. So it's cool. What I mean? Like she could buy all the diapers and and the clothes. I don't got no job. Right. So I'm like, no, that's not an option. So I'm like, I need to be gainfully employed. Right. So I was considering different opportunities and I started out I found an agency that was, looking for tutors and substitute teachers. So I ended up hooking up with them. And then that led to a long-term substitute position, which led me to becoming a full-time teacher. So really, it was because I had a baby on the way. So I had to get out there and get it. And and then I became a teacher because that's what was available. And I had a strong math background, even in spite of some of the moments when I did have some academic, some math anxiety and some discomfort in math classes. For the most part, I did do well, especially certain years when I had like some strong teachers I felt. But so having a baby on the way kind of was what pushed me into education.
Well, which child is this? Is this Kwame, Asada, or which child?
No, this is Naseem, the oldest.
All right. Well, shout out to Naseem because Naseem, you are part of the primary reason why we have Akil in this much needed field teaching math to our Black and brown babies. So shout out to the way that babies can thrust us into the grind, can thrust us into our purpose, and long-term can have a greater impact on our lives. And shout out to him. And so when I'm thinking about what you're describing, and I love that you say it's not glamorous because again, when I think about my journey and what I went to school for versus what I'm doing now, there's not a direct alignment. There's a correlation, shout out to my math folk, right? But there's not a direct linear alignment. And so I can totally appreciate that. And something that I read recently that I know is going to resonate with you is, when we talk about the cultural responsive factor of mathematics, or really the lack thereof, the whitewashed nature of mathematics. And something that I read recently, I want to make sure I quote it correctly. Mathematics is an intellectual and scientific tool created and invented by African people for the purposes of systemically studying, learning, and comprehending nature. And there's a field of mathematics that corresponds to every aspect of nature. And I remember reading that definition and thinking, I would have been sparked if I had even heard that definition in my K-12 journey. And so when you think about what you're doing now to be a mathematician and a connector for the culture to help bring math awareness, how does that definition either strike you or does it resonate with how you define mathematics?
I think it resonates a lot. And the important thing about it is, I think it's very historically accurate for one,
Mhm.
because there's kind of like a benign neglect type of thing going on where they won't say, in most like popular books or most popular conversation, they won't say that, well, black people or African people didn't do math, but they won't say that we did,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
They leave
then,
it nebulous. Yeah.
yeah, then they'll always have but then I'm gonna give you this textbook with all the formulas and everything that are named after Europeans. So you're gonna draw a conclusion naturally that, oh, this is some white people stuff, right?
Yes. Yes.
Then absent any other information or any other type of guidance, that seems plausible, you
Yeah.
know. But I think about people like the late like Sheikh Anta Diop, who was so when I knew he was a historian and a linguist, but then when I found out he was a physicist and a mathematician, that inspired me as an educator. So,
Mm.
oftentimes we talk about like students being inspired, which is very valid. But even just as a classroom teacher, like I think learning about him and then learning about other, because he's on the side of like, the a lot of the people in like the African centered,
Mhm.
scholarship community, kind of revere him as like this historian. And then I see, okay, but he was doing the math also. So I think learning that really helped me as a classroom teacher early in my career, realize that I gotta tighten up and I gotta
Yeah.
get more serious about this, because this is not just about like being a company man and coming to work every day and teaching the kids how to solve equations. Like this, science and this, methodology, which is what math is really about like survival and us being able to thrive, and also being able to reestablish our prior position as,
Yeah.
as we had, in terms of having great civilizations and being great contributors to the globe, as we
Absolutely.
once did, and so that really inspired me a lot. So I like that definition, because
Yeah.
it makes me think of that, you know.
And it connects it to Africanness, right? And
Hmm.
that's not something that is usually synonymous with studies of math, at least not in my K-12 public education. And since you're calling to the space like people that inspired you, a book that comes to mind that inspired me on my education math journey. I'm sure you've heard of it. Lisa Delpit's Multiplication is for White People.
Yeah,
And just the
yeah,
title alone had me like, huh? It was almost
yeah,
like when I saw Chris Emden's For White Folks Who Teach in the Hood and the rest of y'all too. Like
yeah.
immediately the title, I was hooked. And one of the things she talks about is that there's no achievement gap at birth, right? And she references like Claude Steele's coined term, the stereotype threat. And it makes me think about, especially when we think of Blackness in mathematics, our disidentification from math being associated with this stereotype threat of not being a math person, and that
Mhm.
achievement in that area is a white thing. And so one of the things, because I did my research, I was watching a brother's Instagram that you talk about that I love, is you think it is a political necessity for Black boys to be deficient in math.
Mhm.
Can you share your why for this statement?
So that comes out of, me studying the late Dr. Amos Wilson. And
Mm.
Amos Wilson, of course, African centered psychologist and, political scientist, wrote several books, about our condition, trying to make sense of, the position that we're in, and also offer tangible solutions for how we can get out of this position. And his analysis, first off, it was a very mathematical approach, because
Mhm.
he kind of led me to the understanding of this Latin phrase that I use often called
Oh, wait, test me, test me. Come on, you talked about it with educate. Cui bono.
Cui bono. Yeah, cui
Yes.
bono.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know.
Like, which means who benefits, or for technically I think it's for the good of whom, or something like
Right.
that, right? But basically it means who benefits. So like with every problem, somebody's benefiting from every problem. So if we look at like, massive math deficiency in the Black community,
Mhm.
oftentimes many of us will only focus on the fact that it's a problem, but we don't look at who's benefiting from it. And I believe that
Yes.
that's why often we're not able to solve problems, because we don't look at who's benefiting. Because if you
Yeah.
remove the benefit, that's the way you solve the problem. And oftentimes the people that are benefiting from it, they'll play both sides and they'll, slide up on to those that are being oppressed and taken advantage of, and they'll act like, oh, we're on your side, but behind
Yeah.
the scenes they're benefiting. So
Yeah.
if we think about the American political system, economic system, the social system of America, Black people, we have traditionally, since the development of this country, since the establishment of this country, I would say, been an underclass. So,
Yes.
and that, that is the
Preserved.
status quo of
Yeah.
America, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So one of the ways that we're able to, be solidly held as a collective in this underclass is by a lack of awareness or an ignorance toward subjects such as mathematics,
Mhm.
literacy,
Mhm.
science, because, and I look at mathematics as like a problem solving tool,
Yes, life
um,
skill.
a
Mhm.
tool to help develop critical thinking ability, a tool to help develop analytical reasoning ability, right? All of these things. So what Amos Wilson is talking about is that in order for things to remain the way they are, we have to be in a position where we're not even questioning the current status quo. We're not even saying, well, we're not even asking questions such as, well, why is this community getting more resources than this community over here? Or
Yes.
understanding that when somebody says, okay, well, we're giving this community $100,000 for these resources, and we're giving this other community $100,000 for these resources, we're not taking the time to realize, like, when they say, look, everything's equal, but wait, what if there are more people in
Yes.
this community than the other one? Like, my community might have more people, so
Yeah.
therefore we can't even think about like what it means to be to per capita, right?
Yes.
Like that
Equity.
100,000,
Yes.
how's that
Mhm.
100,000 getting split up, right? Because you might
Yeah.
have less people in your community where you getting 100,000. So,
Yeah.
but see, all of that is like, that requires mathematical thinking, and as
And you're
long as you
making
can
me,
keep
yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. As long as you can keep, I don't want to cut a
keep
brother off. Mhm.
keep the people from thinking mathematically, those conversations won't even come up, because they'll
Yeah.
just be like, look, we're gonna take this 100,000 and just be happy with it.
Yeah.
And at
Because we
some
got,
point you got to be like, nah, hold up, like, nah, because like this is we're supposed to have more resources, because it's not like a gift anyway, especially if you're talking about like governmental allocations of tax
yeah.
dollars. Like, that's
Yeah.
not a gift. The government doesn't have its own money. The government's
Yeah.
not like our parents, like the government gets money from taxpayers. So that's
Us.
actually our money,
Yes, yes. And
so
even making me think of like economics. One of my eurekas in studying that platform was doing like a real deep analysis, just observationally, of my community. And it's like, why does this community have 7 bookstores and this one has none? And this community has at least 3 libraries and this one has none, right? And it's not coincidental. It's very systemic. It's very intentional. It's very connected to what they think we value. And I'm using
mhm,
the nebulous they, but we know who they is, coupled with what they see us spend our dollar on. Right. And
mhm.
so when I think about, the intentional need for us to disidentify from mathematics, as you say, it's a part of a larger oppression. And so shout out to Cui Bono. I didn't study Latin. I studied Spanish and Japanese. Is Cui Bono or how do you say it?
QE, as
Cui.
far as
All right.
I know, QE Bono.
You gonna make a sister make a Sadie sweatshirt, Cui Bono, walking around asking people who's benefiting from this problem,
Who's benefiting?
because that'll tell
Yeah.
you what the issue is, where the root is. All right, I love it. And so another thing that you talk about connected to this idea of who benefits and the political necessity for us to disassociate from math. I mean, multiplication facts. It sounds very fundamental and rudimentary, but you say that that's a foundational requirement for our young people. And when I think about when they switched from math over to Common Core and they started to veer away from, we don't want kids memorizing things and we don't want them to just sit and have drills of their fluency facts. I remember thinking, that's what saved me in college. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? As you're struggling with new content, knowing it like the back of your hand or your social security or all those other things. Like, talk to us about why you think multiplication facts are a foundation that should be a non-negotiable in every Black young person's household.
And I also think that, I like that question. It's one of my favorite questions. It's a very Eurocentric worldview position to, do the whole like either or, it's got to be either or, like, because I see, like, and a lot of people, like you mentioned, they'll say we don't want children memorizing anything anymore, you know.
Yeah.
Now the conceptual approach is very important, you know, because I think that, you know, growing up, I didn't really have a strong conceptual foundation in mathematics, which led
Mhm.
to problems at certain points. Like when I got to more advanced topics, I couldn't really make the connection. I didn't catch on as quickly because I didn't
Yeah.
have a conceptual foundation that was strong. But, you know, I think we definitely need to memorize certain things, or at
Mm.
least after learning and then being taught, you know, to us conceptually over
Yeah.
time, the goal should be to memorize. I think the goal should be to memorize the multiplication facts at a minimum up to 12 times 12. So up to
Yes.
144, right? And then even memorize the factors, like memorize factors of
Mhm.
numbers. So you just know them, you know, just know what they are. Because you're gonna need them, you know, and I think that leads to like a lot of academic fatigue.
Yeah.
And you know, with children trying to solve math problems, and then they spending so much time like you trying to figure out what 8 times 4 is. It's like, bro,
That's
that's
not
not
even the
even.
real problem that we're trying to
Yeah,
solve.
like that's something you gotta, like, you know, when people talk about like in relationships, you got like men and women got to bring certain things to the table, like,
Yeah.
you know, so we can have a healthy relationship. Children got to bring certain things to the table, and they have to be taught certain things, and you know, certain things should be memorized. They should just know it. Like when as soon
Yeah.
as they see it on paper or on a board somewhere, like if I see 8 times 4, you got to know, oh, 32,
Or
just from
two.
recognition. You hear
Yes.
somebody say 8 times 4 or 4 times 8,
Figure it
just
out.
know it's 32 because
And
it.
yeah, you know what you're making me think of too. And I know you've heard this not only through tutoring in the community, but through your profession, teaching in different grade bands. You know, when you have parents say, "Oh, this is that new math," right? Well, first of all, the multiplication facts are forever and always, right? So
Mhm.
that is one way intergenerationally, even if you have a school district that is subscribing to the new waves of how to teach math instruction, having that foundation at home of your multiplication facts. I don't care if you went to school in 1932 or 2002. That's something that can be a great bridge to connect parents
Yeah.
with their young people at home. Because I know for one thing, and I have 5 children, and 3 of them are still school age right now. They are definitely getting drilled. I had the little placemat growing up. When I
Mhm.
ate my meal, it was like a chalkboard placemat my mother gave me with the times tables. So I definitely agree. Here's a number talk agree that the multiplication facts. Listen, YouTube community, if you are watching this, if you are hearing Brother Akil and me speak about this topic, if you do nothing else, help your young people commit to memorizing their multiplication facts. It's a necessity. It's a
Yeah,
necessity.
yeah. And
Mm.
let me clarify, because some people got really upset because I was on another podcast.
Okay.
Shout out to the Building the Black Educator Pipeline podcast. And you know, they pulled a clip. We were having a similar conversation, and they pulled a clip where I was like, listen, because I know that one thing that motivates people is fear, right?
Mhm.
And discomfort. So I'm like, you know, and you know, this wasn't even just some, you know, some false propaganda. This is a reality. I do believe that if you're a parent and you have a child that's in 3rd grade and they don't know their multiplication facts by heart, then you should be worried. You should be
Yeah,
worried. But you know, you shouldn't be pessimistic. You can be optimistic. It just means, okay, this is where we are now.
you got to double
And this is
down.
where we got to get to, because your child has to know that. Because if they're in 4th grade
Yeah,
or 5th grade and don't know it, you're behind. But you can still catch up though. But let
absolutely.
that belief, that feeling of like, okay, my child doesn't know this. Let that light a fire under you, and there be a sense of urgency. So you say, okay, look, we got to prioritize this. You know,
Yes,
kind of like if you find out, okay, I got to get this money up because we're gonna get evicted in 2 weeks if we don't get the money up. That's a sense. There's a
yes,
sense of urgency. There's to be the
absolutely.
same type of sense of urgency like with multiplication facts,
Yes,
because that is the foundation to so much. Like problems that students have years later
thing-
oftentimes can be traced back, if we reverse engineer it, back to them never knowing their multiplication facts by heart, you know, because
yes,
there's so much math that grows out of that. So but that clip, you know, people just, you know, kind of zoomed in on that clip, and then they, you know, they created their little like straw man arguments and was
yeah,
made the assumption that I'm saying that they shouldn't learn it, because I do
no,
understand too that some people are of a school of thought where it's like, nah, like, you know, we're not even going to teach it. We just want them to just memorize the facts. We don't need them to understand the relationship between the numbers and the relationship between addition and multiplication. Not at all. I think you got to know, because again, that's the conceptual foundation, right?
Yeah.
They should have a conceptual foundation with a goal of ultimately having it memorized so that they don't have to think about it.
Well, listen, I'm standing shoulder to shoulder with you as a 20-year deep math educator and number lover myself, who did not have a glamorous journey along the way. And if I could add one more way to think about it for our viewing community, if your young person was in 3rd grade and could not read a leveled book, you would be concerned. Right. And there would be no hesitation, like, oh, my child can't read. There's a literacy issue. Keep that same energy for numeracy. That's all Brother Akil is saying. And the barometer for that in 3rd grade is multiplication facts. So we heard it here first. Or maybe 2nd or 3rd. But that's what this brother means when he says it's something that we should know. And I love that you said it's not either or, right? Because sometimes we get into this theoretical like battle. Is it skills drill? Is it concept? And you're saying that no, it's a hybrid of the two.
It's both.
And so speaking of a hybrid, Sadie's Books and Beverages, we call ourselves, like I told you, brother, a bookseum, because we blend books and museum in one. And one of the things that I love that I also peeped on your platform is this idea of histematics, right? And so when you think about like compartmentalizing subjects, like you go to English, then you go to math, then you go to science, it's much more powerful when you take an interdisciplinary approach. And the two that you're really dope at blending are history and mathematics, hence histematics. And one of the things I saw, unless you would like to shine a light on another example, Steve Biko. I was introduced to him in college for the first time. Shout out to Steve Biko. I write what I like. And you talk about connecting him even to a study of geometry. Do you want to give us some examples of your histematics approach and, you know, why you go so hard in the paint for blending these two core content areas?
Well, the reason I go so hard is, well, there's a lot of reasons, but one reason that comes to mind is so Kwame Ture is one of my intellectual heroes. You know, rest in peace to Kwame Ture. And that's why my youngest
Carmichael, for those who want to know his plantation name. Yes.
Right. Exactly. And you know, so much so that, you know, my youngest child, Kwame, is named after him.
Nice.
And there's a speech. I mean, he gave so many speeches and did so much work in the community and in the world. But he made this this speech. I think in 1968 there was a free Huey rally because Huey P. Newton was in jail because the Oakland Police Department were attempting to assassinate him, and he defended himself. And allegedly, he shot a police officer. So there was a rally, and there was, you know, the community was raising money, and he spoke. And, you know, prior to him, H. Rap Brown, another figure from the time, Jamil Alameen, he's a political prisoner right now. So shout out to him, still holding his head. One of the things Kwame Ture said in that speech is that every Negro is a potential black man. And what I took that to mean, and he wasn't trying to exclude women, you know, that was kind of just you know, I think every Negro is a potential, you know, black person is what he was trying to communicate. Is that, you know, a lot of our people, we become weaponized against our community, you know, and I see that one of the ways that happens is that we lack a certain political orientation and a certain political and historical awareness, because you have a lot of brilliant black boys and girls, like right now, like in the world, like in public schools and charter schools and private schools, brilliant, absolutely brilliant black boys and girls. They're doing advanced level math and learning, you know, calculus and all of these things. And they're going to go to college and study physics and, you know, mathematics and, you know, computer science and everything. But they're not learning a proper and appropriate history. They may never hear of somebody like a Steve Biko or Thomas Sankara from Burkina Faso or Maurice Bishop from Grenada. They may never have heard of a France Fanon or an Assata Shakur or Ida B. Wells or people like that. And because they never hear these people, they never consider these types of approaches and these types of positions that black people can take in this society while developing those math skills. So then they use those then they end up developing those math skills, and they end up using them to basically only gain individualistically, and oftentimes they're used as weapons against their own community.
Yeah.
And I think a part of it,
Unbeknownst
to them sometimes, and I think a large part of it is like I think it's because of the lack of models that they find out about, because you don't find out about these radical people. You don't find out about the different people that were leading like slave rebellions in the 19th century and the 18th century. You don't find out about all of these people that were more nationalistic, and that were like, look, these people are never going to treat us as human. So it's going to be difficult to try to integrate or really assimilate into this society that they control. But it's also going to be difficult to build our own society. But it's going to be, as I said, it's going to be difficult for us to try to assimilate and integrate into this anyway. So it's really a question of, again, mathematically, choose your heart. It's going to be hard either way, because a lot of times when people look at the people that start talking this nationalist stuff, and we should build our own communities and be independent, do independent this, independent that, people look at you like you're crazy, as if, oh, we could never do that, we'll never be able to do that. Well, it's like, bro, are you able to integrate? Can you do that? Can you do that right now? Like, we're getting shot by cops, that we pay taxes to into, so that they can have a salary, and we still getting shot by them. Like, so I mean, we got to take a moment and think. But I believe that a large part of it, why that's so foreign, is because we're not exposed to a lot of the examples of people that really lived that life and really was about that life. So while we're learning how to solve quadratic equations, while we're learning how to graph cosine and sine waves and curves, while we're learning how to simplify expressions using exponent properties, I try to integrate into that some different some certain types of political figures and historical figures. So when because you might not go that route, but at least you have a choice. I think a lot of our children, they don't even have a choice. They're just in school, they're given one thing. One type of example of a black black political orientation, cultural orientation, and we're just expected to follow that. They don't even have the option to say, well, maybe I want to go with this or that. Let me see what some options are. We don't even have options. So one of the things that histematics is meant to do is like, okay, so while you're learning the mathematics, we also want you to consider some different political approaches. So we use history to teach mathematics, and we also use mathematics to teach history simultaneously. Because one of the things is also unfortunate is when you have a student that might be in school, and first period they go to math class, and the teacher may be doing a lesson on percentage calculations. The student may be completely lost, right? Completely lost, does not understand percentage calculations, and that gets exposed in the math class. However, the same student goes to history class next period, and they may have to read a sentence in the textbook, or from the textbook, or from an article that speaks to, for example, like 48% of the enslaved Africans that were brought to the Western Hemisphere actually went to the Caribbean, right? You may read that, and so the student may read it confidently. So the history teacher may think, okay, the student understands what that means, but they don't understand what a percentage is. So even though it may sound like they know what that means because they're able to read the numbers 48, they understand the percent symbol, they don't really know what that means, like in the context, because they don't understand the concept and the definition of a percentage. So what that's meant to do, and there's so many things in terms of, because to truly understand history, you have to have the ability to do quantitative reasoning and quantitative analysis, and all that's just math. So you got to be able to do the algebra. So it kind of really doesn't make sense for us to compartmentalize the subjects the way we do. Because there's no subject that you can't use math in, or that you're not required to use math in. I mean, even I remember in 7th grade in English class, and we were doing grammar, and we had to diagram sentences. And I immediately loved diagramming sentences, because to me, I think it reminded me of an equation, because it showed me how every sentence is like an equation with its different parts. And I was just organizing different parts. And I just really liked it. And
Yeah.
even when I read like, I'll read every sentence like an equation. Like, okay, does this make sense? Like, okay, does this add up? Like, okay, this is this, and then he's saying this is this, or she's saying
Yeah.
this, and then saying that. Like,
And what
does
you
it make
see,
sense?
yeah, and that's the whole core of it. Does it make sense? Mathematics gives you the ability that when you're reading something historical or you're reading an article to be able to question if it's making sense to you, right? And what it also makes me think of is something you say about how math can be a catalyst for freeing the Black community from different forms of oppression, right? And it's only when we really understand math that we can understand how historically and systemically some of those policies that are being created are rooted in a quantitative analysis because someone has an algebraic mind, right? Or is thinking algebraically to calculate the ways to create the barriers and the obstacles to deny. And so I love that you have blended those two things because I agree. There's not one thing in life that I don't think can be connected to mathematics nor a subject area. And so shout out to histematics. If you're curious more about that, check out Brother Akil, All This Math. He has plenty of examples on his website, and I'm sure that doesn't even cover all that he knows with the wealth of knowledge for blending those two subjects, because it makes me think of episode 3, which was Undeterred with Brother Sekou, and he was like, essentially his supreme disconnect from certain topics was the lack of Africanness, right? And you're not connecting it to anything that makes sense or has meaning to me. And so you'll be hard pressed to find a young person, maybe not with all the political jargon, but when they hear the stories of Assata Shakur, of Frantz Fanon, of Mumia Abdul-Jabbar, of Huey Newton, right? Something in those journeys, I'm confident will resonate with almost all young people. And there's a way to weave math into those discussions. Even shout out to Bob Moses, who talked about algebra being a civil rights issue, right? Which we won't delve too deep in unless you want to go there, brother. But everything that you're saying is like sparking something that I strongly believe in and have subscribed to all the way over here in New York, because you're in Philly, right?
Yeah, based in Philly. I happen to be in Baltimore right now. I do a lot of work in Baltimore, but Baltimore is where I was raised, though. Baltimore raised me.
Baltimore. And shout out to HBCUs. You slid Morgan State in there real quick. I just want to shout out HBCUs and all they do to create a lot of the dope doctors, lawyers, engineers, mathematicians. A bulk of them are coming out of those dope universities. All right, so I'm going to call another book into the space because I'm low-key a bookstore owner, right? And so something that you said that you're currently reading is Schools of Our Own by Worth Camille Hayes. And so what drew you to this title, or if you want to share like what's currently resonating with you as you read this book?
Well, so this book is, I guess I kind of cheat on books, right? Because I'd be like, I'd be juggling like multiple books at the same time, but so this is one of the books.
That could be another t-shirt. I cheat on books. Anyway, go ahead.
So this is like one of the books I'm reading, but anything that's talking about independent Black education is something that's going to be attractive to me, because I'm always interested in like how it was done, because so often, and I've been in the education space as an educator since 2005, so I'm going on 20 years now, and I've been present for like a lot of the conversations and a lot of the, education activism and a lot of the things that get highlighted, and whether it was the school to prison pipeline or whether there was issues about standardized testing and whatnot. And at some point a very long time ago, I just realized like yo man, like we got so many complaints about this system. What's stopping us from just starting our own? And then I started learning about, well, wait, like, and then I didn't see a lot of examples of independent Black schools around me.
On
So
purpose, behind them.
So it makes you think. It's almost like if you can't see something happening, you'll assume that it never did happen. Yeah. And then I got introduced to this book called We Are an African People by Russell Rickford. Yeah, We Are an African. So what he does, and I think he was at Columbia, and he studied under the late Manning Marable. And it's basically a study on independent Black educational institutions in America in the 20th century.
Okay.
So he talks about the East out in Brooklyn with J2 Wayusi. And he talks about some people out in East Palo Alto, California, in the Bay Area. He talks about like just different independent schools, and not just like a lot of the independent schools was like Afrocentric and like, you know, Pan-Africanist, but some people wasn't. Some people was like, nah, we not into all that, but they still were Black folks that understood the importance of us educating our own children and having control of the education of their children. So that, and it just opened my eyes, and I was like, wow, like we could really do this, you know. And then I started seeing people that were doing it, like, you know, kind of, because you got like the brother you know, Marcus Klein out in Chicago. You got other people around, like around the country, like forgive me if their names are escaping me right now, but you know, they're around, definitely, they're definitely around. You know, and some of them I work with, like you got like the IA Institute. I teach an SAT prep class with them, and they're based in Atlanta. You know, and it's different homeschool collectives and homeschool groups, but I like to learn about examples of us actually teaching our own, you know, because I think that's what's needed, you know. And I also want to figure out, like, okay, well, how can we be successful at it, you know, because you know, it's not, you know, we're up against a lot, because again, it's a threat to the status quo. I mean, when you talk about the Black Panther Party, and here's another thing I do want to say about this. I think we need to reorient ourselves, because oftentimes we like when people always talk about how J. Edgar Hoover said that the Black Panther Party's free breakfast program was a threat to national security. People often push back on that, but what I say is I think we should lean into that, because I think if we understand how America already is anti-Black and has always been anti-Black, just the mere act of our existence represents anti-whiteness, because white is a social construct, right? So white is a social construct. So my mere existence, and this is what I always say when people ask the question, like, is being pro-Black anti-white? I said, that's the wrong question. That's the wrong question. Whiteness itself, if we examine whiteness and analyze what whiteness is, whiteness doesn't allow for, there's a hierarchy, and it doesn't allow for other people that are not white to embrace their full humanity. So my mere existence is already a threat to whiteness, right? If we understand what whiteness actually is. So me just walking down the street, I'm a problem in that context, right? So when Hoover says, like, oh, it's a threat to national security, I believe him. It was based on what they are trying to secure, right? So when we look at it like that, we have to like consider that, like, when we're trying to like build our own schools and, you know, educate our own children, that's also a threat, you know. But I think it's something that we got to do anyway.
Let's say that that teacher prep programs, right? Let's say that, yes, we need to build our own and create our own, because now you're also sparking me to another conversation that we're on the rise of the 60th anniversary of the Brown v. Board decision, right? And another brother, shout out to Brother Sekou, he was saying that he thought that did the most harm to Black education, because when there was integration, which wasn't real integration, you literally were funneling Black students into white schools, but there weren't Black teachers or Black principals. They all got left behind, right? And so let's say that simultaneously, in this spirit of not either or, but supplementing, right? That we start building our own schools like some are already doing nationally. What would it look like in your imagination of a utopia for teacher prep programs to get remixed for math educators? So like, what are some requirements that you might add? Like, if you're going to teach in the system and Brother Akil gets to pick the requirements to teach math in these urban and suburban communities where Black and brown kids make up a majority of the demographics, what are some of the requirements that you think teachers are going to have under their belt or show proficiency in to teach us?
Well, so they're going to have to know math. A lot of teachers that are teaching math don't really know math. They're not really proficient in math, procedurally, you know, and conceptually. I can attest to the fact that when I entered into the classroom as a full-time teacher in 2005, I didn't have a strong conceptual foundation in math, right? And I think I did a lot of students a disservice because of that. Procedurally, I was sound, but if you weren't a student that could just, if you weren't a student like me, like how I was as a student, if you can't just take a formula and just memorize like how to replace the letters with the numbers, then you probably wouldn't have got a lot of meaning out of, like, you know, my classroom instruction, you know. I also think histematics should be be a mainstay, I think that too, like learning about, history and culture, at the same time, because I think what it does is similar, again, another reference to the Black Panther Party for self-defense. When we think about political education, right, which is what a lot of our people, I think, lack, or at least a certain type of political education, because we all are getting political education. Just oftentimes we get the political education that is much aligned with the overall overarching status quo that it currently exists. A lot of the math concepts and the theories in math and the ways in which, the different topics in math, they mirror, a lot of, political science concepts. So, and it's a way to like teach math can be used to teach political education. Again, this is another aspect of histematics. I'll give you an example. And I'm saying this as a teacher, but also as a person, that is a student of math and the way I understand math. When I think about how to solve a radical equation, shout out to Bob Moses and Charles Cobb, the book, Radical Equations. They're basically two steps, right? You have to isolate the radical and then eliminate the radical. So when I realized that, then I'm like, this sounds like COINTELPRO.
That's what they do to us. Yes.
This is what happens. So it's like, while I'm teaching that lesson on radical equations, it's very easy for me to just throw that out there. And then it helps the student to remember the process. So they don't necessarily forget, because what I've done is I've put it into context.
Yes.
Context of an explanation. And then it gives it creates a nice segue to talk about, well, what did happen to Assata Shakur? What happened to Mumia Abu Jamal, who incidentally just turned 70, is still incarcerated. Like yesterday or the day before that. What happened to, a lot of our, our leaders and our figures that were more radical. What happened to them?
And eliminate.
Isolate and eliminate. Exactly. Dr. King, Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, a lot of these people. So we can have that.
It's formulaic.
And we can have that conversation in a math class, and all these, so different things that we can do. Beyond that, making sure they know math, they have a strong math foundation, knowing having a I guess certain cultural grounding, so they can be culturally responsive, we
should pause right there, brother, because those two alone are gonna have people in a cold sweat. Just those two alone. If we could just knock those two and have them firmly held down, I think we'll do a wave of a service for the math education field. And the other thing you're making me think about, one of those edubabble words in math, the real world application. And I hate the way that's very surfacely approached, where they try to teach. Let's take it real elementary, right? You're trying to teach addition. And instead of just saying 5 + 2, real world is, I go to the store and I have $5 and then mom gives me 2 more. How much money do I have now? Now, yes, that's something that could happen in the real world. But if we're talking about non-surface rooted real world application, what you're describing with that example about, learning how to solve a radical and how that translates to something that is a systemic and political issue, I would connect way more with math teaching it that way than teaching it about dollars and apples and going to the grocery store. Hands down. And so one of the things, you wanted to say something? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, something came to mind. So also, like, in terms of like a teacher prep program, I think about Du Bois, and I think about one of the things that, what Du Bois said and wrote so many things, but one of the things he talked about is, when he begins his study of people, of African people, he begins with the fundamental assumption that the African is a human. And I think that's something that it seems very basic and something that we should be able to take for granted, but I think we can't, because if we look at a lot of the studies that take place and how people of African descent, we are included in a lot of conversations, it becomes abundantly clear that the assumption is that we're not human. Right? So that's something that has to be like really taken into consideration. In terms of like how we, engage and like, because a lot of it is because there's this, this fundamental belief in just this like black pathology that I don't think exists. And it's like, I mean, we got our issues, we do certain things, but again, if you believe in the humanity of a person, then
Yeah.
you won't just immediately indict them as just as subhuman.
Yeah.
You may first look to the environment, which actually makes sense, because you
Yeah.
may say, okay, well, in a different environment, would this person be acting this way?
Yeah.
And then it becomes an issue of, well, let's address the environment. How can we address the environment so that
Yeah.
we don't, this behavior is not duplicated and continued, on and on.
Listen, sparks are just flying, because what was it? It was the day before yesterday when we were supposed to actually do this conversation. And I'm sure you're familiar with Dr. Joy. She's now Joy DeGry, but she was Joy Leary. She wrote Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome.
Right.
She
Yeah.
has this whole speech that she's giving where she talks about, like, if I stood right here on the stage and I stomped out a puppy, you would be traumatized by it. I would be probably arrested quicker than killing a Black man in this country for stomping out the puppy, right? And she talks about how desensitized and dehumanizing it is that Black people are seen as less than when they were lynched, what was done to a puppy, right? And she shows even images of lynchings where you have children staring up at the tree. Some are grimacing or smiling. And she's like, imagine how much has to be ingrained that you can see the lynching of another human and not be moved by it or traumatized by it, but actually stare at it as if it was a piece of art. And so what you're sparking in me by sharing that Du Bois quote is, even though it's something very simple, like seeing Africans as human, it's such a huge thing when we think about the history of this country and all the work that was done to criminalize us and dehumanize us. So it's a huge, huge thing that I think will go a very long way. And we have miles to go before we can sleep on that one. But one of the things I definitely wanted to call out, I've been talking about Kwame's book. We've been talking about Lisa Delpit's book. Brother Akil has a book. He has a whole book. How to all this math, and it's only volume 1. So that gives you a sneaking suspicion that there's going to be more volumes to come. Can you talk to us about this book? And I want to, I'll make sure I put a link to it in our Instagram, on our YouTube page, because what I love about this manual, again, going back to today's parents, when you sit down and you're trying to connect and help and support your young person with math, this is like literally a one-stop shop guide to helping you navigate those conversations and build a sense of numeracy with young people. So tell us about this book and when volume 2 is coming out.
So this book, it was long overdue, but it came out, again, it wasn't on schedule, but it was on time,
Yes, Nas.
Yeah. So it came out last June 2023, and it just came as a result of me because I was so immersed in math, and I was doing, teaching and, doing so much tutoring, and, I was working full time in all this math. And I was just starting to really see the world through a very deep mathematical lens. So when I go into rooms, and like I heard, one day I was listening to like the radio or something, or watching an interview, and somebody was interviewing Papoose, and they was asking him like, when do you write songs, or how do you come up with ideas? And he just was like, I just be out, like just going through my daily routine and regimen. I just be walking in the streets and I just see stuff and I just be thinking of rhymes. and I just, as a mathematician, that's just what I be doing. I just be out places, like driving or walking down the street or just walking around the house, or I see something on TV or wherever, I'm reading a book and I just see math problems. I see math problems all around me, or potential math problems. Like, oh, that could be a math problem. That could be a math problem. And then I just get to thinking about how we are all, I think, conditioned to, as parents, because this was our experience probably as children and as students, to have our math education completely outsourced to the school that we go to whether it's public, charter, private, whatever. And we don't even have a lot of mathematical conversations in our households. Some people do, but a lot of us do not really at all, because we've been conditioned that way. Like, math is, let's leave that to the professionals, right?
Yeah.
And what people need to know is that there's a lot of people out here that couldn't teach their way out of a wet paper bag, right? So as parents, we got to know that, right? Because sometimes we give deference to educators that we really shouldn't, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes. But shout out to the solid teachers out there, though. Definitely shout out to the solid teachers. So, and I also realized that students and children need to be prepared for math class. They can't just go in, with no prerequisite skills. They got to be prepared. So what I want, and also in conjunction with that idea, is that I want for schools, especially if we don't control the schools, because something else that H. Rap Brown said, Jamil Al-Amin, who ran with Kwame Ture in the 60s, and they were in SNCC together. Any institution that you do not control can be used as a weapon against you, right? Yep. So if we don't control the public schools, we don't control the charter schools, we don't control the private schools, and even if your public school has a black principal, even if your charter school has a black principal, and all you got black assistant principals and everything, and they're not really calling the shots.
Yes,
because it's all about, you got to follow the money. Like with everything in a capitalist society, you got to follow the money. So whoever's controlling the purse strings is who controls that, and oftentimes you won't even see that person, right? Mm-hmm. So I want for like schools to become places of practice, right? Kind of like when like the young brothers go to school and they want to play basketball at recess. They love recess. They don't learn how to play basketball at school. They learn around the way. They learn at home. They learn in their community. They learn at the local rec, and then they go to school to show off and show their skills, and showcase themselves and compete with other people from other neighborhoods and other blocks, right? Yeah. I think math should be the same way. I think math should be taught in the community, or at least the conversations around math and the development of those skills should start in the home. And a lot of people say that, but see, I want to make a distinction. When a lot of people say that this should start in the home or that should start in the home, oftentimes it's a way to provide destructive criticism to Black parents, because that they're not doing that in the home. But again, this goes back to the Du Bois quote. I begin the conversation with the fundamental assumption that the African is a human. If you believed in the humanity of that person, then you wouldn't say, well, that mom just don't want to help her child. That father just don't want to help her child. No, they probably don't know the math. And we listen to the complaints, like parents complaining about the new math this and new math that. And I understand the complaints. So this is where the book comes from. It's like, okay, cool. Like, that's a valid complaint. Maybe you weren't even good at math yourself 30 years ago when you were in school, or didn't think you were good at math, right? Because that's another thing, right? A lot of us have that imposter syndrome about our math ability, right? But this book is meant to I take everyday activities, like, going into your children going into the kitchen to get a snack, or riding around in the car, running errands, or this or that, just regular basic things. Yeah. And I show in a detailed manner how that can become all those things can become a teachable moment where you're introducing them to certain arithmetic topics, algebra topics, geometry topics, so that they'll be prepared for when they go to school. Because when they go into the classroom, a lot of times they're seeing math vocabulary for the first time. They're seeing these math topics for the first time.
They're inundated.
Inundated, exactly. It's like going into a boxing ring with a heavyweight world-class fighter, and you've never even put gloves on before in your life. Right. You're gonna get your head boxed off. This is what our children are experiencing, just because they've never even seen. Like, I got a chapter in there on unit conversions. So like, if you take a let's say your child goes into the kitchen to get a little bag of chips or something. Every bag of chips has like, the weight on it. It might be the 1 ounce bag of chips, right? 1 ounce, 28.3 grams. So that's a math lesson right there. You know why? Because you could then ask your child, well, if 1 ounce is equal to 28.3 grams, how many grams is 3 ounces?
Yes.
And I show you in the book how to break that down. And so imagine, like, every time your child grabs a snack or a bottle of juice or a bottle of water, 500 milliliters, at the same time 15.9 ounces. You say, okay, well, if that's 15.9 ounces, how many ounces is would 2,000 milliliters be?
Right.
So that water bottle becomes the textbook right there.
Yes.
And we do that in the house. We don't got to wait for school to teach that. So when your child goes to school and they're in like 6th grade, maybe 7th grade, depending on your school district, and that's when the curriculum, the unit conversion is the standard they're responsible for. When they sit in class and they see that, they like, oh, okay, this is okay, cool. I've been doing this in the house for years.
Implicit memories. They'll have implicit memory. Yeah. And that's what I love about this book. It's like a how-to guide for parents, right?
Yeah.
We were making the analogy to how our young people have affinity, some for sports. Like, this is how you can get your reps in right here.
Yeah.
With this book, you don't need no fancy digital platform or a MacBook. You don't need any like manipulatives or Unix fixed cubes. All you need is this book and some things in your house and the will. And this book will help grow your skills. So shout out to How to Use All This Math. We have Helping Hands here at Sadie's, which is our version of an enrichment program for the homeschool community. They'll be getting this for session 2. And maybe even at our Juneteenth festival, we'll raffle this book off to the community as a way to dispel and disrupt the deficit narrative of the Black community being afraid of math. So you too could be unafraid, like Akil Parker, just by way of purchasing this book and immersing yourself in some math thinking on the home front.
Can I say something else too about that?
Yeah, of course.
So also what ties into that too, I want people watching this to understand is that, like, think about what happens when you meet a child, when any of us meet a child and we find out that child has a parent that's a math teacher. What's the first thought that comes into mind? Oh, you must be good at math, right? Mm-hmm. Now, my children are good at math, but it's not because they were born that way. I don't believe that. I believe that, like Amos Wilson talks about, I think all Black children are born as geniuses. The society dumbs us down, all of us. The society has a desire to dumb us down because it makes us easier to control, right? If we're dumbed down. So we as parents have a responsibility to try to prevent that dumbing down process, or that underdevelopment process that Walter Rodney wrote about in How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, right? This is the same thing. We have a responsibility to try to prevent that as best as we can. But I say that also to say that a lot of these tactics and ideas that are in this book, they're battle tested. These are actual things that I've used with my own children, right? Yes. So I'm giving you what, and I love my kids. Right. So I'm not going to give them no BS. So I'm sharing with you the things that, I want for them, So I like, probably my favorite chapter in volume 1 is the chapter on negative ages.
Oh, yes. I remember reading that.
That's the introduction to negative numbers, which, a lot of children, when they get to algebra, if they've never been exposed to negative numbers or the numbers on the left side of the number line, it blows their mind. They're like, they're so confused. They're like, how can you subtract a bigger number from a smaller number? How can you do 2 minus 8? How can you do that? Right, exactly. So you can introduce that to your child early on by just telling them when you are already telling them stories anyway, right? Because we tell our children stories all the time. We tell our children stories about, when I was your age and we used to do this, or y'all sit around in the house all the time and y'all be on your phones. We used to be outside riding our bikes and going this place, going this, that, doing all this. You can actually ask them the question. Like the first time I ever used this strategy with Asada, my daughter, was, I was telling her a story about something that happened to me or I did when I was like 8, or maybe 10. And I asked her, I said, well, how old were you when that happened, Asada? And she looked at me like I was crazy because she was like Daddy, I wasn't even born yet, right? But it was an implicit math lesson, because if she knows that I was born in 1980, which I told her, she can figure out how old she was technically, right? When I was 10 years old. So she knows what year she was born. She's born in 2012. So on her every one of us has our own personal number line.
Yes.
Yeah. So her 0 is 2012.
The year she was born.
Year 2012. So then she has to figure out, okay, well, if my dad is telling me something about when he was 10, what year was that? He was born in 1980. Let's do the math. 1980 plus 10 is 1990. So we're talking about 1990. Exactly. So find the difference between 2012 and 1990, which is going to be 22 years. But it's before she was born. So therefore it's negative 22. So she was negative 22 years old when that took place, that story that I'm telling her about. So think about all the times that we're telling our children stories about the past, or, anything that happened in the past, especially if it's before they were born. That's even better, because then you can do this all the time and they'll be introduced in an organic way, in a very practical way of how to use negative numbers. Right.
And there's no boundaries on it because numbers are infinite. So you can even do it about grandma. You can go back to grandma.
Exactly. you know, and we could do it like with histematics. The histematics approach is I might say like, yo, okay, so if Dr. King was born in 1929, or you know, when did the Montgomery bus boycott happen? That was 1955, and you could say, well, you know, how old were you when that happened? You know, and it gets kind of deep because when you think about like history, I didn't realize for a long time like wow, King was assassinated in 68. That was just 12 years before I was born. That wasn't even a long time.
Your context to history.
Yeah.
Right. Not these generations long before. Like, I remember having that experience when someone said how old Ruby Bridges was. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's in her 60s. Like, she's not this like old archaic woman. Like, she's still living and breathing. And that history is a lot closer to me than I think. Yeah.
And let me say one more thing about that. I think even for like me as a man, it's really dope to be able to do that with my daughter. But then I think about the sisters, like the women, because like when y'all are born as girls, you already have all your ovaries.
Yep. And our eggs.
So the reality is, right? Like if you having a conversation with your daughter about that, it's like, no, she was really with you when you was doing that thing. She was physically there with you when you was doing that thing when you was 5 years old or 10 years old. So then becomes a biology lesson. So I was
like, what's that word? Biohistematics.
We use the math as an entry point to get into the biology and the anatomy and physiology. Yeah. And you know, and then so it's, you know, it's then when I realized that, I said, oh wow, this has so much potential. This has so much potential.
And you know what else it reminds me of? I don't know if you follow him. His name is Jermaine Fowler. He put up something recently where he was talking about ancestral mathematics, but it was connected to the concept of exponential growth. So similarly to like negative age, how many ninth great grandparents do you have, right? So you have your two parents, then those two parents each have two parents who are your grandparents, and how it grows exponentially, and then connecting that to a conversation about, you know, what do you think were their obstacles and barriers for their generation? And you are the bloodline of those people who have survived that. So is that not all within you, all that greatness? And I was like, oh, that's a great way to teach exponents. And I don't know. Volume 2. I hope it's coming soon because this has to go all the way up through calculus and not for
the end of the summer. The end of the summer. That's the goal. The goal is the end of the summer. Yeah.
And hopefully we get you over to New York. I know you're a Nas fan, so hopefully you'll come through. Shout out to 30 years of Illmatic. You'll come through and maybe do a book signing or something with the young people of this community because we're hard pressed to find Black males in education nationally, let alone in the math field. So shout out to you and all you're doing to disrupt that narrative and push us forward.
Can I say something about Illmatic?
Yeah,
so
please.
Again, histematics connection. So Illmatic came out in 94. Another very important book that I still need to finish. You know, I feel kind of ashamed that I never finished it. Is Yorugu by Marimba Ani. Yorugu by Dr. Marimba Ani, who used to teach at Hunter College back in the day. She was there with John Henrik Clark, you know, back in the day. But yeah, that came out in 94 also. So this is the 30th anniversary of that book too, which is like a staple in the African Center worldview movement.
We got to December 31st to finish that one, brother. We'll put you on You got to
we'll see.
The 31st anniversary coming. You don't finish that book.
We'll see. We'll see.
No pressure. Well, shout out to that. And again, you've been dropping a lot of book gems. We're going to make sure that we show these titles, not just in the description box, but also that they are present on the screen so that all of our viewers can grow their shelf awareness, as we say here, towards Black mathematical excellence and all its greatness. All right. So it's rapid fire time. One thing we do here at Untenured, we ask some rapid fire questions, no explanations needed because you said what you said, and that's enough of a reason why, right? We also have 3 micro segments. Right before we hit those, we want to do our time for 10. And so for these quick questions, first thing that comes to mind, and feel free to say pass if nothing's coming to you. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
You stay ready, right? All right. So here we go. First thing, at what grade did you have your first Black teacher or principal, if ever?
Black teacher or principal? I had a Black principal in I know I had a Black principal in 3rd grade when I first moved to Baltimore.
That might be the youngest ever. What about a Black teacher, let alone math?
Black teacher besides my mom? besides my mom and dad.
Oh, shout out to mamas being the first teacher. Yes. Shout out aside from your parents.
Aside from my parents, I want to say like the first school I went to, which was on the Lower East Side, it was a private school,
Okay.
Lessix, Lower East Side International Community School. I want to say I had like a couple of black teachers there
Okay.
at that school. You know, I started going
You were-
there as a kindergartner.
So you were blessed and highly favored in that regard. That might be a first here with all of our guests. Most have said not till like 11th and 12th grade, if ever, or college. So you are a first for that. Thanks for sharing that. All right. So if you had to name, I can tell you're a hip hop head. If you had to name an artist whose swag matches your educational vibe, who would you pick? Like if we took a tool and we put him in an artist, he would be.
Damn, as an educator, it's I don't know if there's one. I don't
All
know
right,
if there's
you could histematics it, you could Brangelina it or something.
I mean, there's like a few people that come to mind, like KRS-One is one of them.
Yes.
But you know, then there's like I would say Nas, but also like them brothers from Griselda too.
Oh,
Yeah, Griselda,
okay.
yeah.
All right. Well, listen, when you see this episode back, I'm gonna do a funky equation with this plus this plus this equals Akil Parker. So Griselda, KRS-One, and Nas. That's a dope combination.
Yeah,
so
that's probably my educational approach and like the way I try to teach what I teach and like, you know, with the aggression. I think I mentioned Griselda because they just like, you know, West Side, West and Benny and Conway, they just don't care. They just do what they do and they just don't care.
Get with
like
way.
Yes. Yeah, that's how I feel about teaching math to black people. I'm like, I think a lot of us far too often we want to get permission from the people that are like, you know, in control of this space or that space. And I'm like, I don't need nobody's permission. I know the math and I just know we need to know it and I know who needs to know it. So I'm gonna just go do it. And you know, so a lot of like, you know, the way in which they talk their talk that resonates with me, even if the content can be problematic at times. And, you know, because cocaine rap is cocaine rap. It is what it is. But I think the energy behind it, you know, is like it resonates with me.
Well, I'm gonna go on a little tangent. I can't help it because when you said KRS-One, I always think of my brother Malcolm, not Malcolm X, my actual biological brother Malcolm. Huge KRS-One fan. Do you have a favorite KRS-One song?
Oh, definitely. Material Love. Love's Gonna Get You.
Ooh, I think my brother's is Criminal Minded. You've been blind.
That's up there. That might be number two or number three. Yeah,
all right.
Poetry.
Yeah. I'm gonna embarrass myself if I try to spit some bars. But speaking of bars, do you have a hype song? Like I'm about to go into this lesson. I don't really know if I'm feeling it today. Let me just throw this song on real quick to get my vibe up.
Oh man, nothing comes to mind. I know I do have some hype songs, but nothing comes to mind right now.
All right. Well, listen, as soon as one hits you or you're listening to it and you remember that I asked you this question, you got to let me know because something that comes along with this untenured podcast experience, we have a hype song playlist on YouTube and it's the combination of every guest hype song from Boosie to Big Crit. And so we got to have episode 5s on the map. So we need a hype song from you whenever you can get us one.
You know what might be? Something just came to mind.
Yeah, tell me.
Triumph off the Wu-Tang Forever album.
Come on. Okay. I don't think I have that vinyl here in the store. I don't think I have that. All right. So we're going to add Triumph and it's going to be called episode 5, Unafraid. And it's going to be on the playlist as soon as this episode drops on the channel. So thank you for digging deep and thinking of one. So what do you think would make the profession of a math educator more attractive, especially to Black and brown men? If you had to think of like, maybe if we tried this, more Black and brown men would become math educators, whether it was their jam or it was not so glamorous, because we need more of them in this space like you. What would you say?
I think we'd have to have more. We have to get into the algorithms on social media and show Black men learning math and using math, you know, using those formulas, those high level, that high level math, you know, we'd have to show it. It would just have to be broadcast more. I mean, it's really just an issue of, like with many things, it's an issue of marketing.
Yep. and
That's what I
giving it
believe.
airtime and airspace in a very upfront and non-independent channel way, like the mainstreams of social media and communication. Absolutely. Do you have a favorite unit or topic to teach in math? I know you said unit conversions
Ooh,
is one of your favorite, but like
yeah.
A through calc, do you have like a favorite? Like this is me all day.
You know, I got so many. I got so many, but you know
All
what?
right,
I would
top five,
say
top
I like solving systems of equations.
five. Come on,
You
yeah.
know, and I'm big with I like the elimination method. I go back and forth. I vacillate. I vacillate between the elimination method and the substitution method.
What about matrices? I like to teach young kids because then just get
So
the variables out of there and just look at the numbers.
so I remember I learned that years ago, and I taught it years ago, like my first year ever teaching it as a professional. But I haven't used that method in, like, you talking about like with Kramer's rule
Yes,
and all that.
yes,
Yeah, like
yes.
so I kind of,
Mhm.
well, you just deal with the coefficients, right?
Yep. And you remove the variables, and the goal is to get zeros and ones in concrete columns.
And you got like the determinant matrix, and
Yep.
then the okay, yeah. So I mean that was cool. I just don't use it as much.
All right. So
You
those, the
kind of inspiring
elimination
me.
substitution, I'm picking elimination. I'm gonna be honest. Like just get one thing out the paint because it's too much on the page anyway.
So I got, and you know, I got an idea, you know, it's something we can like to promote math, like, you know, among, you know, in the community. It's like, you know, have black teachers kind of just like, you know, we take a problem that can be solved in different ways. And you know how somebody, you know, people do the things on social media where they're like, who did it best?
Oh yeah. Oh, when you sign it, so two people solve it simultaneously.
Yeah, or even if you do it one at a time, but like, okay, he uses substitution method, she does elimination method, he does matrices,
Yeah.
he does graphing, he graphs the two and see where they intersect, and then
Oh,
like, you know, just had the kids like, and it's almost like a rap battle almost.
yeah, but with
Because
math.
yeah,
Oh,
but so it's kind of like the problem is like the beat, but it's kind of like how like different rappers will rap over the same beat.
yeah,
But
yeah.
we're just doing the problem differently, but it's the same problem, but we're doing
Okay.
it differently. So
See,
it's almost like,
yeah, I like your version better because something I watch a lot with my son is it cake? And I'm always like, what's a math version of it? So I was like, imagine like people all, and I promise you can ask Kobe. We had this conversation the other day. I was like, imagine a show where three people are solving a math problem and one is using all the wrong math. They're just making up stuff and getting to an answer. And you have to decide which one is the actual math. But I like your version better because you're not modeling bad math practice. So we got to figure out a name for that, and we got to figure out how to make that hit the streets this summer because that's a
yeah,
dope idea. Dope idea. All right, and then the last one: do you have a pet peeve as a Black male educator being in educational spaces? Primarily, not the ones that are independent, but the ones run by the man and the they.
Black male educator being in that space.
Yeah, like a pet peeve. Like, please stop doing this ASAP. ASAP.
There's a lot of I would say anti-intellectualism in school buildings. And like even when somebody that doesn't like, they may not be a quote unquote math teacher, they teach another subject, or they teach like, you know, a liberal arts type subject, and they embody the same type of, or almost like they take pride in having math deficiencies, you know, as an adult in
Yeah.
the building. And you know, the kids respond to that, the children respond to that.
Yeah.
And it almost is like it almost rationalizes and justifies their own discomfort.
Yes.
You know,
And
so I think
about not having math, like you would never hear someone joke like, I can't read. Like, it's not cool to be illiterate. You don't walk around promoting that.
right. So I think
Mhm.
like, you know, in a lot of school buildings, some people, I mean, it's levels to it. You know, some people, they own the deficiency in a certain way where they're like, you know, it's not really, you know, I wish I did know, you know, but some people kind of like wear it as a badge of honor. Like, you know, it's like, bro, you're a teacher, like you're a whole teacher. Like, why are you, you're a whole administrator? Like, yeah, why are you promoting that? Like, why, you know, the students are hearing this, you know, you're making my job harder. Like, why, what are you doing?
It's just a walking oxymoron. So don't be a walking oxymoron, and especially not in front of Black and brown students who are already battling enough isms to have to add that to the things to have to unlearn. All right, we got it. So our first micro segment is called "Oh Hell No," and for anyone who's been watching and tuning in with us, you know that it's our opportunity to weigh in on a hot topic of our guest choice. And I'm going to let you steer the ship with this one, brother, because yours is more of a not a specific article, so to speak, but a general issue you have with how the media portrays Haiti. And so what do you want to get on the mic and share unapologetically about why you're saying, oh, hell no, to the media's portrayal of Haiti?
Because, man, and, you know, shout out to Haiti because, you know, when you study the, you know, the Haitian Revolution, you know, 1791 to 1804, and not only, you know, did they go to war, but they went to war with like three major European nations and won. You know, they beat France, beat Great Britain, beat Spain. I want to say the United States got involved and they got cooked too. So, but they, you know, Haiti has always had to suffer because of that, you know, due to whether it be trade embargoes, you know, just negative portrayal in the media, you know, people attempting to migrate being denied, you know, entry to the United States, just all types of things. Whether if it was in the 1980s and there were rumors that everybody from Haiti, you know, had, you know, HIV or just all this negative propaganda, it all goes back to what Dessalines and, you know, Toussaint and all of them was able to accomplish. It all goes back to that. But I think that it was, you know, of course it was important, you know, but I think we have to learn those histories and those types of histories, because oftentimes in school, you're not going to learn about that. You know, you're going to learn about, you know, us, you know, just being enslaved and us losing. So if you think about it as war, right, it's really, because our enslavement is really a consequence of losing a war, right? So we are essentially prisoners of war, right? Forced to work because we're prisoners of war. So if you look at like Haiti is an example of us winning. And then when you start to look at it in that context, and you start to think about, well, where are some other examples where we won? And there were a lot of examples where we won. Like there were a lot of rebellions. You know, you have maroon spaces that were created when people like escaped and then started different communities. And some people came back and would get people, you know, and come back and like mess up plantations and then take people with them and they go back to the maroon space. And then, you know, whether it be in the United States or in South America, parts of South America or in the Caribbean. So, you know, I mean, it is par for the course that like with recent, you know, happenings, you know, in Haiti right now, recent upheaval in Haiti, that, you know, the Western media is going to jump all over that and, you know, make it seem like, you know, oh, we got to go in there. We got to, you know, because these people are savages. But it really is like the deeper issue is the fact that, you know, Haiti won. You know, they defeated the West and they were the first.
And one of our taglines here in Sadie's is that we love first, because we're the first Black-owned bookstore in Orange County. So we have major love and deference and reverence for first. But no one talks about the curse. We usually glorify and we talk about the gift of being the first, but no one talks about the downside. And so thank you for shedding light that it's a double-sided coin. Yes, Haiti was the first to do it and deserves a lot of light to be shined on being the first. But the ripples that caused for them as a country, we're saying, oh, hell no to how the media portrays them. And oh, hell no to anyone who takes media for their first source of information. Do your own research, grow your self-awareness, and learn more about these things, because a lot of it is by design, steering you down the wrong path away from facts.
Yeah, can I recommend another book?
Yes, please.
So there is probably the most popular book on the Haitian Revolution is C.L.R. James, Black Jacobins.
Oh, yes.
I never finished that one, but the one I did finish was by Jacob Carruthers. Jacob Carruthers was one of the founders of ASCAC, the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations, which was an international conference has been taking place this week virtually. His book on the Haitian Revolution is entitled The Irritated Genie.
The
So
irritated
entitled
genie.
the
All right.
Irritated Genie.
Well, we got to add that to our shelf. We got to add that
Yeah,
to our
that's
shelf.
that's one that's the one that I read, and I just remember reading that, like just getting hyped, like man, like you know what I'm saying, like especially when I learned about Dessalines, like Toussaint was cool, but Dessalines was more like nah, like we
We're
we
not
gonna
taking that.
we gonna kill all of them, like we're not playing with none of them.
We're not playing.
They all got to go. Like Toussaint, I think, was trying to be more diplomatic, but I think so. When I'm studying Toussaint, I think of Kwame Toure's critique of Dr. King, and I use the term critique lightly because Kwame Ture studied under Dr. King. But again, Western media would never want us to know that somebody like a Kwame Ture was associated with Dr. King because of how they want to portray Dr. King in our history, right? In our historical awareness, right? They want to give a warped view of him, so they can't associate those two. But what Kwame Ture said was like, in terms of nonviolent resistance as a principle strategy, it would never work because in order for nonviolence to work, your enemy has to have a conscience. Because the idea is that, okay, if you're beating me up and I'm purposefully not fighting back, at some point you're going to stop fighting me, stop beating me up because of the humanity that you have within you. These white folks in the South had no humanity. And when I say in the South, that's not meant to, do the whole historical revisionism thing and act as if like the whites in the North had more of a conscience, because they didn't, right?
They definitely didn't.
But it's kind of like, I think the thing with Toussaint, he wanted to kind of like align himself with France, and he wanted Haiti to be like a what did he call a protectorate, a political protectorate, kind of like a colony of France, but with some independence. And I think he didn't understand white folks. He didn't understand them really. Dessalines really understood, and he was like, nah. Like Dessalines was like, nah, like I know what it was like when we was enslaved by them. Like, no, ain't none of them. No, we're not doing none of that. We're not doing none of that. We're gonna be free, and they all got to go. And that's it. And I think
we definitely going to get those books on the shelves here, because I know you're sparking someone to say, I got to read what this brother is talking about. So we will make sure that we get those titles. The second one I'm not familiar with. Can you just repeat the title one more time? I'm going to put it in my bookshop cart right now.
Yeah, so the second title is The Irritated Genie. It's about the Haitian Revolution, and is written by Jacob Carruthers.
All right. Well, I'm going to make sure we get that on the shelves. It'll be in the description box. And just shout out to being a wealth of book gem knowledge so that we can literally go into the summer and cheat on some more books. We might have to stop this book and start reading that book and just keep a good party going. All right. So shout out to Oh Hell No. That's our first micro segment. We're now going to shift over to Deuces. And the way this works for those who are tuning in for the first time at home, I'm going to give Brother Akil 3 topics or 3 things that happen in education. All of them are harmful. Let me be clear. All of them are harmful. But the goal is, if you had to pick one to chuck the deuces up to right away, because you think it's the most harmful of the 3, there's no right or wrong. It's all in how you can justify or your reasoning, so to speak. But you don't have to tell us your why. You just rapid fire tell us which one has to get the deuces. You ready?
I'm ready.
And if I'm doing this right, they get slightly spicier, because that's another thing in math. I don't like to say the problems get harder, because then our children lose confidence because they think hard things are things they have to quit. I just talk about what level of spice are you ready for? So we're going to start off mild, and then it's going to get super spicy. So the first one, which one would you give the deuces to? All the Black staff are security, custodian, and cafeteria employees only. All the Black staff are skin folk, but not kinfolk. Or all the Black teachers teach remedial or non-advanced courses. Which one got to go?
All the Black staff are skin folk, but not kinfolk.
All right. We're not asking you why, because if you need to know why, then you need to DM him to find out. I think I know why you said that. So we're going to push on to the next one. All right. When all the Black students lack math confidence. When all of the math students, Black students lack math connectedness to their future endeavors, like they can't see how this is going to serve them and what they're passionate about, or when all the Black students lack math relevance to their everyday life. So confidence, connectedness to their future, or relevance to their now.
I'm chucking the lack of confidence.
All right, because then that's the
Chucking that.
domino for everything else. All right, confidence
Yeah.
got to go. So teachers got to build that Black math confidence. Here we go. Whitewashed curriculum, the white savior mentality, or white fragility. Which one got to go?
Oh, that's a good one.
Okay, I did
That's
my
a good
job.
one. That's a good one. Can you run them by me again?
Sure. Whitewashed curriculum, no Africanness, blackness, brownness, nothing. White savior mentality. I'm gonna go in the hood and save these babies, or white fragility. Everything bruises your ego. Victim, victim.
I'm getting rid of the white savior mentality.
All right, all
Getting
right.
rid.
No need to
Yeah.
explain why. That one has to go. Here we go. Next one. Strict entrance requirements to advanced math courses. Like you got to get the 87 if you want to go to trig on geometry, right? Programming students only for state math required courses. So you don't need calculus and pre-calc to graduate high school in New York. You only have to get up to geometry and 4 credits. It could be electives that like not requiring upper level math before college or teaching math without any cultural competency.
Yeah, I'm doing teaching math without any cultural competency.
Boom. And if
Yeah.
you didn't know why, go back and listen to the last hour. I
Yeah.
didn't even doubt that that was going to be your choice. All right. And then
Yeah.
here's the last one. Teachers who teach math without joy, they're just dry like toast and they're boring. Teachers who teach math without strong content knowledge, 2 plus 2 is jello and you just screwing kids up. Or teachers who teach math without any culturally relevant practices.
No
joy, no content knowledge, or no culturally relevant practice.
No content knowledge.
No content knowledge. All right. All right.
Yeah.
So there we have it. You survived deuces. The goal is not to make a brother sweat. It's to have us really start to think about, wow, is that something that's really in my child's educational journey? All of these things are going on. Which one can I feel most connected to turn that narrative around? So shout out to surviving a micro segment of deuces. And our last rapid fire segment is called They Say, You Say. Some of these are going to sound real familiar. We hope we don't trigger a brother. It's things that you hear that if you could just tell them what you're really thinking, here's your unfiltered opportunity to say and get it off your chest. Are you ready?
Tell them how I really feel.
Yeah, real talk.
Oh,
real
yeah.
Talk. How you ethics is allowed because this is for grown folks. Okay.
Okay.
I'm just putting it there, but I'm sure you're not going to lean into it unless you have to. So they say angry black man. You say
a concerned black man.
Hello, hiyo. Okay. They say mathematics is about counting, not color. So please stop with all this blackness. It's about counting, not color.
I say they want to keep math about the color of white.
Hello. They say not every child is going to be good at math. So pushing them towards higher levels of math is not necessary. Like not everybody is going to need those maths. Like stop pushing them towards upper level math. You say.
I say they should stop projecting their own personal insecurities onto children in the school building.
Insert bomb sound. All right, here we go. They say, I'm a math teacher, not a history teacher. So what is all this histematics? You say.
I say that's a weak argument because when you're teaching math, you already are implementing historical reality. You know, it just may not be something historically relevant to the students that are in front of you.
Hello, hiyo. Okay. They say skills drilling is damaging to students. They need to think critically, not memorize. You say.
I think that you have to have certain information memorized in order to be able to think critically.
Come on. They say third graders are too young to learn about the enslavement of Africans. Like if I'm doing this histematics thing, they're too young to learn about that. You say.
I say you're never too young. And also, as a footnote, I don't think we would say that about Ashkenazi Jewish kids learning about the Jewish Holocaust.
Insert chisel
too young.
Insert chiseled cheekbone. Okay. They say black kids don't need to take calculus. They need to learn to balance a checkbook. You say.
I would say, again, don't project your own personal insecurities onto black children. if they are that, or stop trying to limit them. Stop trying to limit them. Balancing the checkbook does not really require, knowing how to balance a checkbook does not really require a lot of a lot of teaching.
Yes. 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 All right. And last one, they say Black males should teach discipline, not derivatives. You say.
I say that learning derivatives in calculus can teach discipline. It can be used as a tool to teach discipline, as much of math can, since mathematics is a subject that requires understanding rules and regulations, which you have to adhere to.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, it also challenges you to be able to recognize when rules are unjust and when rules are inadequate and don't make sense. So again, I think there's an overlap between discipline and derivatives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, listen, you just survived a round of they say, you say. You didn't even skip a beat. So it makes me feel like you just stay ready for the pushback, which I'm here for, because I really subscribe to the idea that, mathematics, understanding and learning is a civil rights issue. It's a life
Uh-huh.
skill. It's a non-negotiable for our community to move forward. And one of the things you say in your wonderful book, How to Use All This Math, is that an informed community is a viable community. And we
Mhm.
say something here in Sadie's that community is a verb, right? Otherwise, you
Yeah.
just live in a neighborhood. So listen, parents, I don't care what generation you are, what math you think you learned, new math, old math. The goal of this conversation is for you to grow in being unafraid, just like Brother Akil is here. He's got a resource to help you lean into that discomfort and get rid of that fear. He's got books that he's dropped the knowledge of that we will be adding here to our Bookseum and on our YouTube channel. And I want to give you the last word, brother. Any other gems or piece of encouragement you want to share with the YouTube community so they too can be unafraid of learning math?
Definitely. So if you are a parent or an adult or a grandparent, or uncle or aunt, and you have had some negative experiences with math, I implore you and I encourage you to use the resources that are available, whether it be my YouTube channel at All This Math, whether it be my book, which we've been talking about. And also I'm going to be doing more parent workshops. Use the resources so that you can overcome those feelings, and that experience. And then you can then help the young people in your community and in your family also. Um, and also, if there are any listeners out there in Baltimore, which there should be listeners all over the country, if not, currently, then there will be in the future. We are offering a histematics summer program. If you're in Baltimore, it's in person. It's going to be from July 8th to August the 9th. And we're going to be covering different books. And essentially, we're going to be, doing something that's different, because the way histematics is, we're using history to teach math. We're using math to teach history. 5-week program, 5 different books, Asada, autobiography of Malcolm X,
Oh
Black
boy.
Power, Black
Oh boy.
Power, the
Brown.
miseducation of the Negro,
Come on, Carter G. Woodson.
and last but not least, there's a biography of Marshall Eddie Conway, who was a Black Panther Party member from Baltimore. Since we in Baltimore, I wanted to highlight that brother. He's an ancestor now. Wanted to highlight him. So we're using those books to create math word problems, because that's another area that our children need to be able to excel in. Because when you think about anytime you sign a contract, anytime you get a bill in the mail, all that is a word problem. Every contract is a long math word problem. Every bill is a long math word problem. We need to understand math word problems so we can survive and thrive. So I want us, for our young people, to be able to learn their own history and also learn math at the same time. So we're doing a histematics summer program in Baltimore. If you go to my my socials, there's flyers on my social. But you can put a link. You can put a link in the episode, right?
I'm gonna drop a link. I'm gonna do an overlay. It's gonna be easily accessible. And I'm just telling you now, brother, you might have to think about integrating a hybrid component, because please believe, if I gotta pull up to Baltimore with Kobe, he gonna get that education, not a word. But listen, they used to say if you want to hide stuff from Black people, put it in a book. Right. And now I feel like if you want to really hide the empowerment of how to advocate for change, you hide it in a formula, right? You hide it in mathematics. So let's stop hiding and be fearful of these things. Let's lean into books. Let's lean into math. And Brother Akil has the tools and the means and the resources to help you do so seamlessly. How to use all this math. At all this math, I'm going to be dropping all of his websites and things on our social media platform. I want to thank you again for responding to a sister's DM and for being unafraid to think that I was spam and leaning into this podcast. I'm sure some of this things you've been saying on other platforms, but I really truly believe that there'll be a unique audience that hears this message from you, and you will be inspiring educators, parents, bookstore owners for time to come, as long as you're in the work. And thank you so much for what you do.
Yeah. No, and real quick before I go, one of the main reasons I responded is because, this is exactly, what I want to do and what I've been doing, just having positive conversations around mathematics. I want Black people to see Black people having positive conversations about math, because far too often we're only exposed to the negative conversations about math. The concerns that we have about the new math, so-called new math, the horror stories, the trauma, the triggering that we experience. And I want us to have more positive conversations around math.
Absolutely.
And also there's a lot of complaints about some of the content that's available on YouTube, that's available in the podcast arena. One of the ways to change that is for more people that have more important conversations to start having those conversations and starting to crowd out, a lot of the nonsense and a lot of the noise, and the chatter. So so the people that have more positive things to talk about, the people that have more important things to talk about, we got to start having more of these conversations and take up some of this space. Because as long as we're not having these as long as we're not taking up space, we are essentially, it's like taking a neutral position, and there's no such thing as neutrality, because if you sit in your car on a hill and you put your car in neutral, that car is going to roll. So as long as you're not having these conversations in this space, you're allowing the people, that want to come on and buy some podcast equipment and, get into this whole gender war thing between Black men and Black women. You're allowing more of them, you're allowing the people to, talk about, sports, like as if we don't have enough outlets already talking about sports. You're allowing the people to talk about celebrity gossip as if we don't have enough celebrity gossip, right? You're allowing them to do that. So if you got important conversations that need to be had, then, we got to start crowding out a lot of that noise, because we're leaving space for them. Right. We're leaving space for them.
We need to take up space. And you're going to love this math joke. Anyone who used to be in Miss Whaley's math class, you know where this is going. And it was corny then. It might still be corny now. But I'm going to say, don't co-sign the BS unless it's trigonometry. I knew you would get it. Yeah. So we're not co-signing. There's no neutrality in this work. Right. If you're going to be down with this histematics movement, grow your self-awareness, lean into the math, help disrupt that fear, feeling. And again, you have a resource to do it. You have a brother leading a summer institute. Follow him on Instagram. Stay encouraged. He uses nutritional labels to teach math. You see him with his daughter doing it in the car. It's what he lives and breathes for his own, and he's sharing that jewel with you all. And so thank you so much for speaking your truth, because here in our house, it never goes left because it's your right. And I look so forward to seeing how you flourish and grow this histematics movement. And trust and believe, when I can get to the Baltimore area with my family, we're going to be leaning in and chopping it up and taking it to the next level.
Indeed.
Blessings, blessings, blessings. And I will be in touch. And this episode is episode 5, Unafraid of Learning Math with Brother Akil.